One of the reasons we're out here in Enfield is because, you know, obviously the riots happened here, but then a few days later hundreds of people got together and, you know, started defending their own communities, showing some solidarity. What do you think about that?
I think it was nice, actually, to see that the community got together to kind of stop it from happening. So no, definitely, for those guys, definitely big well done, I think, the ones that were out there protecting for themselves, definitely.
I mean, there are a few other communities like in Hackney and Dalston and in Newham, in Green Street, in Birmingham, people came out to defend their communities. And what's interesting is that they all got quite a good press. But when the same thing happened here in Enfield, you know, politicians and the press were quite worried because it was mainly white people who were coming out to defend their communities, or they happen to be white. I mean, so, you know, for them it's like, oh, if it's white people, they're going to be racist. What do you think about that?
I think that's just stereotyping them, really. I don't think that's really fair to say that it's all right to do it in Tottenham and somewhere else because they're coloured. Than it is for the white. It's not all right for the white people to do it up in Enfield.
There's loads of people who come from deprived areas, and yet they're not going around smashing shops to get, you know, what they want. I come from a deprived area. I live in Edmonton. My daughter comes from a deprived area. She lives with me, but she's not going around doing that, and she's very successful at school.
I understand you were involved in local community groups that were involved in defending local communities and businesses. Do you think that that was an inevitability given the perception that the police were not doing anything on the ground?
I think people just got fed up, to be honest with you. You know, they could see their towns getting torn apart. At the end of the day, people live here, they pay their taxes, they don't want to see, you know, their place torn apart the way it was. And I think it's inevitable that some people are going to take it along their own backs and do something about it. I mean, what started out as a very small movement on Tuesday night around the Enfield area turned into quite a big movement from 200 people to about 700 to 1,000 people. And I think, again, the same kind of mentality as the guys who went out and caused the trouble. It's the same mentality, whereas let's go out and stop the trouble. People just all join in the same way. So it's inevitable people are going to defend their territory.
Do you object to the term vigilante and the potential loaded symbolism that it may carry?
Yeah, I don't think the right word is vigilante. I think it's just literally people having enough, you know, enough is enough. When you're looking at premises getting smashed up, people being put out of work, people being put out of their housing, it's inevitable someone's going to come up and say, you know what, I ain't taking this anymore. I don't think the right word's vigilante. Vigilante is, I believe, in films, like, you know, I mean, Charlie Bronson, people like that, they're vigilantes. These are just people just basically saying enough is enough.
Do you think the police or government are at fault at all? Did they do anything wrong?
Well, yeah, I think they should have rushed in, to be honest. I mean, I see there was one bit of footage where the police ran down the road and then they all ran away. And that's what they would have done anyway. They would have just run away because it was just kids. It wasn't like big men with, you know, lots of tooled up and stuff like that. It's just a load of kids on Hackney or Lewisham or wherever it was, just throwing stuff through shops and being hooligans and thugs, really. You know what I mean? It wasn't. They're scared. They're much more scared of the police. But once they see the police were holding back, that gave them the opportunity to do more looting. So I think the police's attitude towards it caused the problem to escalate, to be honest. I mean, I think education is the obvious, you know, problem. Like general knowledge and sense of everything else. Like knowing what other people are acceptable for and how everyone feels about everything else. I think that's just general common sense education-wise. So people have got loose morals, and that's the problem, really.
So not just things you can learn in schools. So where do you think the government could teach people this common sense? I mean,
well, it's not the government can't teach them because the government have the most less common sense out of everyone. You know, to be honest, like they're terrible.
What do you think about the police?
It's a slow reaction, like all the communities did all the work, like all the people of the community.
Like they were complaining that they needed all the communities off the streets, but without the communities, like so much more would have gone wrong.
And the riots themselves, do you think they're a race thing?
I think in Tottenham it probably was mostly fueled by like race. I live in Tottenham and I kind of know like most of the black boys get stopped, but like in other places, like I remember in Birmingham, like there were loads of different like colours of people. It was like it's like a rainbow, but like there were so many people. I don't think race had like anything at all to do with it. It was people that wanted free stuff and just quickly, really.
Do you agree with this whole idea that if we have more youth clubs for young people, perhaps they would have more of a...
I don't really think that. I don't think it will change anything, to be honest. You know, that like, we can come together and do some activities, then after you're just going to go out and do what you're doing. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't think... That's the answer to everything about with kids and stuff. Build some more youth clubs. I don't even agree with that. I don't even agree with that. I don't think that's going to help. It's like, it's deeper than that, do you know what I'm saying? Building youth clubs are not going to stop trouble.
Do you think that the fact that there is a very low community spirit, you know, this idea that communities aren't really tightly knit together, has probably led to youths these days just thinking that they can do whatever they want?
You saying that, yeah, the community of Tottenham came together and rioted very nicely, so yeah, I don't know, I think the community is that, and I was saying to my friend before it spread, I was like, but I don't think other places will come together and riot like that, but they did, and everyone just sort of, so I don't think it's community. I don't think you need to feel like you know everyone where you live and stuff like that to feel like you're not going to, bad stuff isn't going to happen. That's not really, I don't think that's the point.
It's like David Cameron's idea of a big society. I don't think that
makes sense.
Well, I think it was down to the government why the police didn't do nothing. The government should have done something. That's why obviously the public had to step in. But I don't know, I think the Enfield boys done their job. That's what I think they done. And as you can see, the streets are empty now. Do you know what I mean? There's no one about no more. They've done their job.
I mean, that's actually why we're here in Enfield, because the riots happened here, but then also, like you said, a lot of people came out to defend their communities and say, we're not going to let this happen over here. What do you think about that? Do you think that's a good thing?
Yeah, it is a very good thing, I think. I'm glad that they done it.
My mum was scared to come out of her house, but once she saw the riot, the anti-rioters, she was
more than happy to come out. It's not a racial thing at all. It's not racial at all. We were just standing our ground for what we believe in, and we are not having our town smashed up.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because one of the things, I mean, people all over London came out to defend their communities in Dalston, in Hackney, you know, in Eltham, over in Birmingham, various other places, and everyone got a really good press. But when the same thing happened in Enfield, it was...
Yeah, they might have thought if they did put it on the TV that could have been a racial thing because it was basically purely white people that were marching down the road, but it's not a racial thing. The boys did not come out to be anything to do with race, nationality, race, nothing. What
do you make of the riots?
Definitely think it is a political message.
In what way do you think it's political?
Well, it's not necessarily political. It's not like the student protests where they're going up to London and protesting in that way. But I think it's just an outburst of violence from these people who are continually shunned within society. And I think this is the way that they have an outburst basically on the streets.
But I mean, it was quite a mix of people that came out on the streets. It wasn't just people who were shunned. You know, like when we saw in the courts last week, some of them were students, some of them were rich. You know, it was quite a mix. So I mean, you know, what if you say it's political? What do you think they're?
Well, I think that there probably was people in there who wanted to go and loot and whatever. That's obvious. But I think that we can't just excuse like this whole thing that's taken off all across the entire country in all these cities as just mindless, senseless violence. This has happened for a reason, and we can't just ignore this happening. It's definitely not mindless violence, as everyone's saying. That's definitely how I feel about it personally.
I don't think I really realised what was going on, except for the television reporting and people being very scared and stuff. But if you walked through Camden Market when it was actually happening, or like afterwards, you could see all the boards and stuff. But it wasn't that. I think they're really exaggerating this on television.
Right, so that's very interesting. You think that the media exaggerated, and do you think through that they were making people scared and maybe encouraging other young people to get involved? What do you think?
I think it definitely made people scared. I mean, all of my friends were really scared, and it was like it was a war or something. But actually, I know just next, like really close to my house, tree was on fire, and that was like the most dramatic thing that happened.
What do you think are the reasons for the riots?
There's been so many cuts, and especially for people from poorer backgrounds, and especially for young people, and that brings them to the streets basically. And I'm sure this is one of the reasons for this happening, because they don't feel like part of society. Why would they damage society if they felt like an important part of it?
I would just like to challenge you on one thing. If you, for example, look at those who have been prosecuted in court, a lot of them seem to have jobs. One of them was, for example, was a charity worker, another graphic designer, another law student, so he was educated. There was also the famous case of that girl who comes from a millionaire's family. So it doesn't seem to be like lack of education or deprivation or poverty as such. do you think it could be something else?
Some people are just against systems, I suppose. Some people are poor and not educated, and I don't know, I think like they all trigger each other, so it becomes like a mass of people doing things like I don't really think they know what they're doing. I think that's a symbol for something that's wrong in a society.
People don't feel the ability to take authority, for one. I think this is quite a lot to do with the fact that we are constantly told how we should be sort of around children, or how we should be in certain situations. For instance, we should eat 5 fruit and vegetables a day. We can't even decide what we eat anymore, you know. So people aren't able to think for themselves. So people don't feel the ability to put themselves in a position of authority to tell people, no, don't do that.
So in the context of these riots, there have actually been people who have then taken the initiative to clear up the streets afterwards. So there's clearly a split between the people who do take the initiative to do something positive and others who want to destroy existing systems. Now, why do you think this has happened? I mean, has something broken down in society?
I think maybe this might even have been the catalyst for the opposite. It's maybe broken people's bubble of relying on those authority figures, for instance. People have taken it into their own hands to realise that they don't need people, they don't need government, the state, to be telling them what they have to do. And I think that can only be a positive thing.
So what did you make of the recent riots?
Well, it depends on the perspective of who was in the riots. At first, there was a justified cause. With Mark Duggan's death, Tottenham had a reason to come out, and there's already a lot of bitter blood between the police and the government and the community there. Myself, just because of probably the way I dress or the area I'm from, I get stop and searches all the time. I'm a pleasant guy, keeping it calm, and they're always about like.
Do you think our reaction to the riots was over fearful?
I thought it was pathetic. I was out and about. I was with my younger brother. We was on the roads. We were just doing. We were literally having our casual routine. Nobody touched us. Nobody harmed us.
We're becoming more broken up. That children and parents and old people and babies, we're all becoming separated. The hoodies don't feel that they belong to somewhere. They're not their shops, their shopkeepers. They're not their people. They're not their surroundings. They're not their lives. They don't feel a part of it. And if you don't feel a part of it, then you've got no interest. You can do what you want with it because it's not yours.
Do you think perhaps our reaction to the riots was overly fearful? You know, shops were shutting down the day after at 1 o'clock, kind of sending a message to, I suppose, sending a message to rioters that if you smash a few things up, you can bring London down to a standstill. Do you think we've sort of responded in an over-fearful way?
It's the first time this has happened to most people, and we don't know how to deal with it. England is England. England is an island. England isn't Germany.
Well, I mean, we've had lots of riots historically. We've had riots, protests, and much more than what just happened right now.
We've had a riot like this before, which seems to be purely for gain, purely as a clever way of stealing.
Well, the police have certainly experienced riots before, and they've certainly been quite decisive in the past in how to deal with them. And even during the Second World War, they didn't shut shops down. I mean, this was nothing in comparison.
Okay, we all of us are bound within this feeling of the times. There is a feeling which makes this 2011. Okay, everyone is very frightened of being held responsible. We have lawyers looking into everything. We're ultra careful about what we take responsibility for. The police are afraid of everywhere. We have this lack of common sense. We've lost this common sense way of dealing with people. A naughty child, a naughty teenager is suddenly a crime figure. we are frightened of just acting intuitively. We try and bring in lots of laws to try and make people behave in a certain way, but it doesn't. It becomes more complicated. We need some laws, but the laws aren't a substitute for having a sensible feeling about what life is about, what other people are about.